So today is Sunday. It is Chaf Aleph Menachem of Tofshin Ayin Daled. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim. Tofshin Yud Aleph, Tofshin Yud Beis. We are in the Maimer of the second day of Shavuos Tofshin Yud Beis. Dibur Hamaskil B'Shor Shehikdimu. And we are up to page Shin Yud Aleph, in the middle of chapter 8. Ois Ches. We are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines from the top. At the full stop, the line starts with the acronym Mashin Isboil the Il. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The line starts with Hainu, and we're at the full stop with the Yuvan. Right? Shin Yud Aleph. You with me?
Aval.
Where's Aval?
That's where we're up to. Aval.
Aval
Idach. Aval Idach we're up to.
Where's Aval Idach?
That's about 12 lines up from the bottom, after the word Ben.
Yeah, so we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to start from the full stop, from Viyuvan. 2 lines above that, at the end of the line. The Rebbe is explaining that when the godly soul interacts with the animal soul, it causes the animal soul to have Mesiras Nefesh, to give away its will to Hashem, because naturally the animal soul has a tendency towards Gashmius, towards physicality. And when it suddenly starts feeling uncomfortable with its involvement with physicality to such a great extent as it is, then that is the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. It means that the godly soul has influenced it with Elikus, with godliness. And it's a new experience also for the godly soul, because the godly soul is in a constant mode of being, not in a constant mode, that the mahus. What is the godly soul? The godly soul is a being of cleaving to godliness, a being that is bottled to godliness. That's its beingness, as it were. That's its mitzias, right? So therefore, to give away its will, godly soul on its own is not aware, hasn't experienced that, doesn't know what that means. And it's only when the animal soul is in that state, which comes about through the godly soul's influence, that the godly soul also suddenly experiences this. And in order for the godly soul to affect the animal soul, the Rebbe explained, the godly soul taps into its most original source in Atzmos, in the very essence of Hashem. Because it's only there that the godly soul really and truly has its power and strength over and above the animal soul. And the Rebbe went in to at the end of the last chapter, if you remember, the contradiction that we find in Mamar Chazal concerning Avodah, concerning man's service of God. Does God really care about it, or is it there only to refine human beings, to refine creation? And the Rebbe said that even according to the opinion that says it's only there to refine creation, nevertheless we must say that even though, according to that position, the actual Avodah, the service, is not important to Hashem, in other words, He's totally beyond that, but it must be that the result is important to Him, because otherwise, why would He have given us Avodah? So of course He chose that there should be this Avodah, He chose that it should be meaningful to Him, but nonetheless meaningful. It's still meaningful, right? And where does that reach? That refinement, which is the idea of the godly soul interacting with the animal soul, that's called Tzira Fabrius, the refinement of creatures, and that touches all the way where? That reaches all the way to Atzmos. And with that, the Rebbe went in started to explain the 3 crowns, the 3rd crown. Right? And even though the 3rd crown is the one that it says in Medrash, Hashem takes for Himself, not Allah Atzmai, it still comes about through the Avodah of Yidden, through our service of Hashem down here below. For although it says that it was the angels that gave Him the crowns, but the angels cannot do their Avodah above, they cannot serve Hashem above, until we serve our Avodah down here below. As the Rebbe wrote the pasuk, Beron Yachad Kech V'Beker, when the stars of morning sing together, and only then Vayiriu B'nei Elokim, only then could the celestial beings sing out, call out to Hashem. Because the Malachim can't say Kedusha above, Kadosh, 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 until Yidden down here below say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Right? So, therefore, the crowns that come about through Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh are through the Malachim, but it's also and mainly dependent on the Yidden saying Kaddish Kaddish. So it's a as it were a joint effort, right? And the senior partner, as it were, the most important the most important ones in this effort are the Yidden down here below. And the Rebbe is going to explain why is that indeed. That's where we're up to. Why are neshamas the ones that are the most important? Why is it dependent on neshamas, and why is it them that bring this whole process about, and therefore, by virtue of that, are credited with giving the third crown to Hashem and what that meaning is. So we are, how many lines did I say from the top? The 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 lines from the beginning of the ois. The line begins with the word hainu at the full stop. V'yuvan, this will be understood. Yeah, we went two lines ahead. V'yuvan, this will be understood. Al pi mashanis bar the ilsiv zayin, based on what was that which was explained in accordance to what was explained in chapter 7. Ha'hefresh bein neshamas lamalachim, the difference between souls and angels. Shemalachim shoshim b'chinas hadibur, that souls are rooted in the aspect of speech, Hashem's speech, kaviyachol. And they are in the mode of a being, of an existence, of a separate identifiable existence. This is not the case concerning souls. Mitziuson, what is their being? They're cleaving to godliness. So in other words, angels are created, and as I said before, that they have a body and a soul, albeit a spiritual body, but a body nonetheless, angels. And they have a soul, because they are created from Hashem's speech. Speech denotes the communication, the reckoning with someone that's outside of you. You're connecting with someone that's outside of you. Meaning to say that the one that is outside of you, what comes about from Hashem's speech, the energy that's defined as Hashem's speech, what comes about is a separate being. A malach is a very high being, very spiritual, holy being, very lofty, very celestial. So he's bottled. He's nullified to godliness. But he has a separate existence, separate entity, separate identity. Whereas a soul, what is the identity of a neshama? It's a metzias of dvekas v'lekus. It's created, but it is something which is what the only description you can give to a soul is that it cleaves to godliness. That's what it is. It's a being that cleaves to godliness. It's not that it's a being which has its own identity and it becomes bottled to Hashem. No, there's no and. This is what it is. Bittul to lekus. So therefore, neshama's connection and cleaving to Hashem is much higher and deeper than what? Than an angel's. But nevertheless, on the other hand, there is a small deficiency in the neshama relative to whom? To a malach. Why? Because the souls, when they come down here below, what happens to their cleaving? Their cleaving to godliness becomes now in the mode of a hidden cleaving, a concealed cleaving, right? As we know only too well. When the neshama comes down into the body conceals on the godliness, the animal soul conceals the godliness, and so on and so forth. This is not the case concerning angels. They stand above, right? In the celestial realms, and they're betachlis habitul, in a state of complete nullification. To the extent the malach's bitul, nullification of the godliness, is so deep that the malach could say, Binish baiti, I swear. Right? When we say Vahi Achab, when the angel comes to Avram Avinu the second time, and he says to him, I swear, so testifies Hashem, that because you did this, I will multiply your children, and so on and so forth. So who's speaking? The angel is speaking, and he says, I swear, but really, who's giving the promise? Who's giving the oath? Hashem is. It's because the malach is so bottled to Hashem, to godliness, that he could say Binish Baiti. And it's a reference to Hashem. So that is the advantage that the malach has over the angel. In the sense that, although he is a being, and it's a separate being that becomes bottled to godliness, but that bitul is revealed and is constant, whereas a neshama, even though it's a being that its entire makeup is just bittul telekus, nevertheless, there is a position when the neshama comes down here below, that bittul, that nullification to Hashem, is concealed. Therefore, therefore, when the Yidden said Naasa before Nishma, as they were down here below, in other words, the neshama is in a body where the neshama is what? Cleaving to Hashem in a state of dveikus nelemes, concealed cleaving. Therefore, kosher malachim. Therefore, it's connected to what? It needs the angels. It's tied to the angels. Kemaimer Azal, as our sages say in the Gemara Shabbos, Shehikdimu Yisrael Na'aseh L'Nishma, when the Yidden, the Jewish people, said Na'aseh before Nishma, they proceeded to say Na'aseh before Nishma, we will do, before we will hear, Yotzes Baskel, a heavenly voice came out of Amra and said, Mi Gila Lebonai Rozeh, who revealed the secret to my children, Shemalach Yashar Mishtamshim Bey, that the hosts of heaven use. How do they know the secret that the Malachim use? So we see that what? That the idea of saying Na'aseh before Nishma, by Yid Neshama Yisrael down here, by Yidden's souls of Jews as they are down here below, is connected to the angels. They needed to hear it. They needed to hear the angels. Hainu she'in zenis gala. What does that mean? In other words, that this idea of saying Na'aseh before Nishma, or the bittul, the general bittul before the Nishma, was revealed. It's Bnei Yisrael, the Malachim, was revealed to the Yidden through the angels. However, so if that's the case, then it would seem that the Malachim are in this process the more senior ones, the more important ones, says the Rebbe. No. It's only that the angels reveal the concept that exists within the souls of Jews, essentially so. So the idea of Hakadomas Na'aseh L'Nishma, this general bittul to Hashem, without going into details, in other words, the bittul to whom? To the Baal HaRotzen. Na'aseh is the bittul to the Baal HaRotzen. When you say Na'aseh before Nishma, I will do whatever you tell me, it means to say that you're becoming bottled to whom, you're nullifying yourself to whom, not to that one's will, but rather to him. It doesn't matter what you're going to tell me to do. So where does that come from? That's something that the soul has innately, mitzat shosham ba'atzmos, because they're rooted in the very essence of Hashem. But who reveals it? Who causes a Yid, a soul down here, to reveal it within themselves? The Malachim. But what are they revealing? Something that a Yid possesses in his soul, essentially so. Now what happens so as a result of saying Na'aseh before Nishma, they got 3 crowns. One for Na'aseh, one for Nishma, and one, there was a 3rd crown, which was for saying Na'aseh before Nishma. For the prefacing of Na'aseh before Nishma. What happens to that crown? So we learned before, so why only 2? Why did the Malachim give the Eden only 2 crowns? What happened to the 3rd one? However, this crown, which comes as a result of what? Of saying Na'aseh before Nishma, saying we will do, before saying we will hear. Shehu, in other words, what does it mean saying Na'aseh before Nishma? Which is the idea of nullification to the owner of the will, to Hashem himself. So what happens with that crown? Hashem takes that crown for himself. And the Rebbe will now explain what does it mean he takes it for himself. This is the idea of what we learned before in the 2nd part of chapter 2, in that what? On page Shin Beis, the pasuk in Shir HaShirim, which says, go out and see daughters of Zion, and go and see King Solomon, and the crown that his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. So what did the Rebbe explain? The Rebbe brought from Chazal is the day of the wedding is Matan Torah. Who? When we say Hashem's mother, what does that mean? It means Yidden. Knesset Yisrael, Malchus, is called Imay, right? And that is what puts the crown on Hashem's head, so to speak, metaphorically. Kavyochel. So in other words, Hashem takes that crown for himself. Why? Yisrael. So in other words, in essence, really what happens is, it's not a crown that goes to Hashem and it has no shaykhs to Yidden, and it's not connected to Yidden. No, it is connected to Yidden. But the 2 crowns that go straight onto Yidden's heads means the neshama, as it is already in a state where it has descended. Whereas when we talk not ala atzmai, it's the way the soul is rooted in atzmai, the way the soul is rooted in the very of Hashem. That's the word. Kishachus of Israel, because the connection between the 3rd crown and Yidden for saying Na'aseh before Nishma, which means this bittul not to the Rotzen, not to Hashem's will, not to the way Hashem expresses himself in his Torah and mitzvahs, but rather the way Hashem is beyond that, even higher than that, that essential bond that the soul has with Hashem, which is higher than everything. That is the idea of not al atzma, he takes it for himself. Because the association of Yidden, the connection of Yidden to this 3rd crown is as a result of how they are rooted in the very essence of Hashem. Baal HaRotzen, the owner of the will. Shebahem Nimlach, with whom he consults Cholu. And through whom Hashem made this decisive decision and to have the will to create the world. And as the Rebbe explained before, when you say the word haklotas rotzen, this essential, decisive, non-negotiable, ever-present, ever-being will to create the world, that's in the highest level of Ein Sof, because you have rotzen agoli, rotzen kodum, and rotzen muchlat. But these are all rotzen, right? The rotzen muchlat is this very essential, deep will for kingship, as it were, that Kaviyachol, he himself isn't even aware that he has this will. It's that which is beyond having this connection, his essential connection to the house, as it were. If you remember, called Adam Adam, right? And Yidden are rooted even higher than that, because when you talk about consulting, so to speak, metaphorically, with souls, whether the world should be created, it must mean the consultation beyond the highest and most initial point of his will for creation, including what? Ratzon HaMuchlat. So therefore they are really and truly rooted, and Shamas is really and truly rooted where? In Atzmus, in the very essence of Hashem, which is beyond any Ratzon, beyond any even grade of revelation in any way, of light. And as they are in their source, in the very essence of Hashem, Neshamas are there not in a state of any existence at all, any being at all. Why? Because the idea of consulting with souls, this is in a mode of the lifting of the female waters from himself and within himself. I'll explain that in a second. This is an expression, this is a quote from the Eitz Chaim, from the writings of the Arizal. What does that mean, halos man minei obey? We know that in order, what's the idea of halos man? The female waters means the female in relationship to Hashem and us. Hashem is the male and we are the female, right? So, after Hashem created the world, Hashem's bestowal of energy into the world is dependent on us serving Him. What happened before Hashem created the world when we didn't exist? So what happened was, it was halos man minei obey. It was the lifting of the female waters, as it were. It came up into his mind, within himself, the idea that they are going to be neshamas who will do the work. But they didn't exist yet, right? So therefore, when you say that he consulted with neshamas, the neshamas didn't yet exist. It was just that he consulted with this, with what with the vision, as it were, of neshamas that is going to come into existence, into being, when he would create the world. It came up in front of him, within him. There will be neshamas tzaddikim, the souls of the righteous. Who fulfill Torah mitzvahs down here below. So therefore, in what state do the neshamas, the souls of tzaddikim, of the righteous, exist in this seminal framework, if you will, where souls don't exist? He doesn't yet have a desire for a world. How do the neshamas exist in that consultation? Their entire existence there is but only the existence of Hashem Himself. And it's a vision, it's an imaginary vision, as it were, within Hashem Himself. So in what state do they exist there? As they are part of Hashem. Really so. And it's not only that you can't discern between him and the neshama doesn't exist in the same state as it does after Hashem makes the neshama. So that's the idea of notal atzmai. Shezeu shekesed zed notal atzmai. This is the idea of Hashem taking this crown for Himself. But why is He taking the crown for Himself? Hainu sheshayich l'neshama Yisrael. It means, in other words, that the third crown is associated and connected to the neshamas of Yidden, as they are in the very essence of Hashem, beyond the Ratzon HaMuchlat. As they are in this state of, within the vision that comes up in Hashem, within Hashem Himself. So in other words, it's also a crown for the Yidden. But when we talk about the two crowns that are put onto the Yidden's heads, it means as the soul is a soul within creation. Whereas when you talk about the third crown that he takes for himself, it's the soul as it is, conceptually in and within himself. If you remember, the Rebbe said that these three crowns correspond to Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim. Because as the Mishnah says in Avos, in the ethics of our fathers, the world stands on three things: Al Torah, on Torah, Al ha'aveda, on service, but gemilas chasadim, and on acts of kindness. So these three crowns, each one of them corresponds to one of these. Torah and acts of kindness correspond to the two crowns that are put on the Eden's heads, that the angels put on the Eden's heads at Matan Torah. The Aveda, but service, that corresponds to the crown that Hashem takes for himself, which is as the soul is rooted in Hashem's vision beyond the Ratzon HaMuchlat. Why? You remember what the Rebbe said about Aveda before, right? That's what's the meaning of service? Is it meaningful? Is it not meaningful? Right? So that goes all the way to Atzmos. The idea says that for Torah and acts of kindness, Shehem Torah, mitzvahs, which in other words is a catch-all way of saying Torah and the commandments, the fulfillment of mitzvahs, because when you say Gemilas Chasadim, ki Gemilas Chasadim tzedakah, he calls on mitzvahs, because the idea of acts of kindness, charity, is the generality of mitzvahs, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, right? So therefore, when you say Gemilas Chasadim, acts of kindness, it's not limited just to acts of kindness. It means all the mitzvahs. Actively doing things that Hashem wants you to do. So Hein be'efen shalom shacha. Torah and mitzvahs are in the mode of drawing down from above to below. Shezehu inyan the ner mitzvah v'Torah. This is the idea of the mitzvah being a candle and Torah being the light. Shemitzvahs imakelim the Eira Torah. Mitzvahs are the candle that holds on, that draws down what? The light of Torah. V'zeu mashav nasan b'reish banov. This is why the crowns that are associated with these two, Torah and mitzvahs, he puts on the head of his children, of the Eden. This means the drawing down of the emanation of the inspiration of God, of Hashem's energy onto the souls of Eden as they are in a state of existence. Right? Who do you give Torah and mitzvahs to? To an neshama as it exists in a body to fulfill it. Aval Aveda. What's the idea of Aveda? Which is another way of saying tefillah prayer. This is the idea of the soul going up and connecting to Hashem. Shezehu, it's another way of saying hakiloyin v'habitul lebalaratzon. This is the expiration and the nullification to whom? Not to fulfill Hashem's will, but rather to connect with Hashem himself, the owner of the will, the balaratzon. Which is similar to what? To the naaseh before nishma. To the state of complete bittul, as the soul is rooted in the very essence of Hashem. This is what he takes for himself, Hainu, meaning as the souls of Yidden are in a state of expiration and inclusion within himself, within his very essence. This is why the sages say in Pirkei Avos that the world stands on three things. What's the idea that the world stands on these three things? It means that through these three things, Hashem's divine intention in creation is fulfilled, and the revelation of godliness is drawn down and in a revealed way into the world. When did this take place? This came about, this comes about through the giving of the Torah and through the service of Yidden, through the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. For although this idea of drawing down godliness into the world exists potentially before, and above we know that potential is not lacking the actual. Down here below, if something is potential and it doesn't actualize, it remains in a state of lacking. It's the idea, an artist who has a talent for art, and it doesn't express it, so you're missing. It's lacking. Whereas above, if it's potential, it doesn't need the actual in order to have that shleimus, that wholesomeness and completeness and fulfillment. So therefore, since the idea already exists, where before the actual exists in Machshavtim in Hashem's vision and so on and so forth, why do we need it in actual fact? Nevertheless, since Hashem had this desire, this innate desire, this inexplicable, as it were, even irrational desire, that he should have a dwelling place down here below, a dwelling place specifically, and down here below specifically. So how could you have a dwelling place down here below? Not in any imaginary sense, not in any potential sense, because in our reality, the potential, it does lack the actual. If it doesn't actualize, the potential isn't fulfilled. Therefore, the main existence of the world, bringing Hashem's intention in creation to its state of completeness, wholesomeness, this came about, this was innovated specifically when the Torah was given, through the fulfillment, through the service of Yidden, down here below, through fulfilling of the Torah mitzvahs. Because in other words, what the Rebbe is saying is, that's why you need the Torah Gemilas Chasodim. It's not enough to have the tefillah. Uklolus in Aksorim. And the general idea of these crowns, Shaykh Matan Torah Dafke, is connected specifically to Matan Torah. For although these crowns come about to the souls of Yidden because of how they're rooted in the very essence of Hashem, the way they are rooted in the very essence of Hashem, which is beyond Hashem's will, they are even higher than Torah. As our sages say, the thought, Hashem's thought concerning Yidden precedes everything. Gam Torah precedes even his desire and his thought about Torah. As we explained earlier by Pirush HaMishnah, in defining the Mishnah in the previous Maimer, if you remember, we learned Chamisha Kinyanim. There are 5 acquisitions that Hashem acquired, and it says Torah Kinyan Echad. Torah is one of the acquisitions. Yisrael Kinyan Echad. Yisrael is one of the Yidden are one of the acquisitions. So the Rebbe explained that how does Torah become Kinyan Echad? How does Torah become one acquisition? Page top of page Shehikdimu. How do Yidden become one? How does the Torah become one acquisition? In other words, that you connect it with the oneness of Hashem. That is through the acquisition, the oneness of the acquisition of Yidden, their connection to Hashem, right? So l'chura would seem what does it seem that the crowns come about through the fact that Yidden are even higher than Torah, and where are Yidden higher than Torah? Because of their root within the very essence of Hashem, and that precedes Torah. So why is the drawing down of the crowns come about through the phenomenon of giving of the Torah? Mikol Makim, says the Rebbe, all this comes about through the giving of the Torah. Why? Because even Yidden, in the way they are beyond Torah, higher than Torah, they also need Torah. Just like it is concerning the soul and the body. Although the source of the body is higher than the soul, right? That's why the soul comes down to give the body life, and that's why what's going to be ultimately, when Mashiach comes, Tchias HaMesim is going to be the resurrection, because the bodily resurrection, right? Why? Because the source of the body is higher than the soul. Mikol Makim, nevertheless, who reveals the great quality, the quality of the body? Mikol Makim Gilu Malas Aguf, who reveals the quality of the body that it has, that it's rooted higher? The soul, because the body without the soul is nothing. Similarly, when we talk about lights and vessels, by the way, on this point that the soul reveals the quality of the body, when we talk about Hashem's choice, Uvana V'charta, right? It's in the guf, dafke the body. Maybe we'll discuss that tomorrow. Similarly, when we talk about lights and vessels, although the root of the kelim is higher than the root of the lights, nevertheless, who reveals this unique quality of the kelim, that it's rooted higher? It comes dafke specifically through the oil that clothes itself within the keli, because again, without the oil, without the divine energy, the keli is meaningless. So it comes there into the keli, and it reveals that which the keli possesses on its own. As a result, by virtue of where it's rooted. Similarly, it's also a connection to the souls of Yidden and Torah. For although the souls of Yidden are rooted where? Higher than the Torah. As we just said before, that the souls of Yidden are rooted where? In the very essence of Hashem. Beyond all the desires, beyond all the desires, even the desire for Torah. Nevertheless, who reveals this? His Galus, Milas, and Neshama, the revelation of the unique quality of the soul, he al Torah dafke, comes about specifically through Torah. That's why the crowns were given at Matan Torah. This is the connection between the crowns and Matan Torah. For although the crowns come about, I think there's a word missing here, but for although the crowns come about, through whom? Through the Yidden's effort, triggering the angels and so on and so forth, and the La'atzmei, as the Rebbe explained so beautifully and eloquently, nevertheless, it's revealed specifically how and when, through the giving of the Torah. This ends this epic Maimer. There's a lot of very interesting things that we should really focus on, very deep things. But this ends this Maimer, and from tomorrow we will start the Maimer of Kisavoyu from Shavuos Pasha Shlach.